All right, I'm going to attempt to get a few voices heard. It's the end of a few days that have been long, hard days out on the ocean, man. Holy cow. Lots of fun adventure. Today was a bit of a letdown for me, although, I mean, we had great time. Great time. People from here, too, from this channel. Great time today. Awesome time. But the fish are in a lull right now, and when that happens, there is nothing you can do about it. It drives me absolutely bonkers. And then to top it off, the wind was supposed to scream, starting at 30 and peaking at 50 kilometers or miles an hour, whatever it is. Who cares? It's too much. And then the rain started coming sideways, and, well, there you go. We almost got our limit, though. We would have if we didn't lose a few, but they took home some great fish today, and tomorrow we're going to do it again. But anyway, this story takes place in the late 90s in Iredell County, foothills of North Carolina. I was roughly 8 years old at the time, out in the woods playing with a friend of mine. It was late fall, and leaves were scattered amongst the ground. And we heard a rustling noise off in the distance and didn't pay much attention to it, as you hear it all the time during this time of year. And as the noise persisted, my friend pointed out a tall, stocky, dark figure 100 yards out, moving from tree to tree in our direction, peeking out every now and then. We retreated to an old makeshift deer stand and climbed up, watching the figure gripping our air rifles as it moved closer tree by tree. Shaking and scared out of our minds, we decided it was best to jump down and book it home. Being fairly young, of course, we knew what a Bigfoot was. However, we were unaware of how one would act, or should act. We would only have an image of what one would look like. I remember the figure being a dark color from top to bottom, tall and wide. And after this event took place, I caught a program on TV one night and sat on the edge of my seat as people spoke of their encounters and how it moved amongst the forest, and about its curiosity validating what we saw that day. A few years ago, I'm 29 now, I reconnected with this friend on social media as I have since moved from the area. I messaged him and asked him if he recalled the incident or if it was all in my head. And he said, "Yeah, man, I remember that. It happened." I refrained from talking about it around people because of the ridicule, and I've only met one person that has also had an encounter, although it's not something people really talk about here in rural Ohio. Thanks for taking this time out to read and potentially tell my story. I found your channel a few months ago, and I can't get enough. Good luck and take care, Bobby. And welcome to the club. Another member. Another member. Now, Milk, this is red. There you go. Well, people are talking about it more and more now. That's for sure. What do we got here? A deer hunting experience. Hey, I really enjoy your stories, and I have one of my own for you. When I was 23 or so, I'm 54 years old now, my dad and uncle and I were deer hunting in Northern California in the Werner Mountains above Alturas? Or Alturas? Alturas. I've been going with them up there since I was 11 years old. I knew the area well. On opening day, I decided I was going to get out early before sunrise and make my way to a spot with a clearing that I thought would be good for sitting when the sun came up. That morning after breakfast, I was on my way in the dark with a flashlight and my rifle, trying to be quiet, and I'm sure alerting every living thing in a mile of my presence. But after I was there walking a while, I started to get the feeling of being watched. I flashed the light around but saw nothing, but the feeling was strong, and it was making me feel very uneasy. This kept up for at least 30 minutes because now I was in a hurry to get to the open area where I was heading for. When I finally got to the tree line, the sun was starting to come up. I went right out in the middle of the meadow so I could see all around me, but the feeling of not being alone was still there. I kept telling myself it was just deer, but this was more like when you're standing someplace and somebody is staring at you and you turn around like, what are you looking at? Like intelligence, not an animal. I know you know what I mean and what I'm talking about. Excuse me. And when you spend a lot of time in the woods, your senses are more alive. So, it was like 30 degrees that morning, so I started walking toward the rim rock so I'd be in the sun as it came up. And all the while heading up there, the feeling never left me. And I was looking around, all around, the whole time, afraid a mountain lion was stalking me or something. When I reached the top, there was patches of snow on the ground. In one of the patches, there was half a footprint of the heel, and at least 6 feet past it, it was half of the front part of the foot. Only these prints were big and wide, and it had 5 big toes. I just stood there looking at them, thinking, am I really seeing this? I know a bear track when I see one. This is not a bear track. It looked just like a human foot, only big, like cast ones. Hold on, I think there's a frickin' crow in my boat. It's time to get him out of here. Yep, there is. Get out of here. Rah. Little bastards. It looked just like a human footprint, only big, like the plaster cast ones. Then I looked over the edge where the track was pointing. It was an open area with flat rock shale that looked just like something had gone through it. And about 30 to 40 yards down was a bunch of short pine trees. When my eyes made contact with them trees, it felt like someone was down in there looking up at me thinking, does it see me? Should I run? Why is it staring at me? And at that point, the hair on the back of my head stood up and I got the hell out of there. I walked fast all the way back to camp. When my dad and uncle got back, I told them about it. Of course, they didn't believe me and just said I was chasing Bigfoot. I've been back there many, many times since then, and I've never seen anything. Keep up the good work. Thanks for reading. Reed Carlson. And welcome to the Club Reed. The Club of No Return, my man. Just joined tens of thousands. Tens and tens of thousands. Who's next? What do we got? Mark that as read. 6 years of reading these encounters from people is absolutely mind-blowing to me. 6 frickin' years. How did that happen? Excuse me. This next email is titled Bigfoot Story. Hi, Steve. I'm 7 years old, and this happened to us back in 68 or 69, the opening day of trout season, about June 1st. And me and my buddy were backpacking into the Marble Mountain Wilderness in Northern California. We arrived at an empty parking lot at the trailhead about noon. There were no other vehicles there. Our destination was 1 Mile Lake. I guess about a 15-mile hike. We threw our packs on and headed up the trail. And our goal for the day was to make it to Hay Press Meadows and spend the night. About a 6-mile hike. We made it no problem. There was some snow on the ground, but we were kind of expecting that because it had been a tough winter that year. The next morning we headed out, and the higher we got, the more snow was encountered. It was getting difficult to find the trail and stay on it. The trails are horse trails, and they're pretty mellow and usually take the long way around, which is understandable. We knew that the lake we were headed to was on the other side of the mountain we were on, and since we had a hard time keeping on the trail, anyway, we decided to leave the trail and just head straight up the mountain and straight down the other side to the lake. It took a few hours, but we made it to the top, and from there we could see the lake. There was ice on the lake, but the edges were open water, so we knew we could fish, and that was a relief. We started down the lake and came across a small clearing in the brush and trees. The clearing was about 200 feet in diameter, and we could see what looked like human tracks in the snow going through the clearing, which we thought was odd because we knew we were the only ones on the mountain. The nearest parking lot was empty, and no one was ahead of us. On closer inspection, we could tell beyond a shadow of a doubt we were looking at Bigfoot tracks. The stride was about 5 to 6 feet apart, and we're clear as a bell. You could see the toes. We both looked at each other and said, "Bigfoot tracks," at the same time. And there they are, right in front of us, plain as day. Then for some reason we looked at each other and started laughing. It was hilarious at the time. Undisputable proof that Bigfoot exists. We were just kids at the time, and neither one of us had a camera. And that was nothing. That was something neither of us could afford nor had any interest in. Who would want to carry the extra weight anyway? We told a few people about it later, but they always looked at you like you were either lying or made some mistake. So eventually you just quit saying it. And that's my story, Steve. Thank you for believing it. It feels good to be able to tell the truth to someone like you, Steve Cooksey. I may have read that one a long time ago, maybe. But oh well, there's hundreds of thousands of people listening that haven't heard it. If I did, I'm guessing. Now, what is this? All right, hold on a minute. Mark, this is Red. Excuse me. Sasquatch encounter on the Cassiar Highway on my way to Alaska. I love hearing experiences from the backyard. I consider all of British Columbia my backyard. Steve, I've been sending this to the wrong email. Steve, hey, just want to say thank God I found your channel, and I'm so thankful for what you're doing. You're the only person on this planet that speaks the truth about this subject. You can use my name if you want. I'm not afraid. The bullshit out there on the subject is so deep, and the most recent on-television expedition using algorithms and predict where a mythical creature might be. Mythical? Are you effing kidding me? Most everyone on this planet is so preoccupied with iPhones and computers and help their self-righteous attitude and somehow have the perception that we as a species are so smart. What will they say when they find out that there are people on this planet who are more advanced than us on the evolutionary chain? Maybe not in the realm of technology, but in relation to this Earth. And we would no longer be able to use Homo sapiens as the DNA baseline at the top of the scale. I can guarantee if DNA were put against ours, it would tilt the scale in the opposite direction. Like, for example, humans, 100% top of the scale. Bonobo chimps, 99.85%. From human, regular chimpanzees, Bonobo chimps, 99.85% from human. Regular chimpanzees, 98%. Great apes, 97%. Orangutans, 94%, etc. If they included Sasquatch DNA, it would say 115%. 15% in the other direction. My point being, why don't you place a human on a mountain in the forest in the middle of winter at 10,000 feet elevation with no clothes on and no tools and tell me how long they would last? They wouldn't last 3 days. These people are far more advanced and in tune with the earth than we could ever be. Arguable. I think we might be able to be there too. We've just been intentionally steered away. Encounter, year 1993, middle of May. This only the 5th time I've told this story to anyone outside my family members. And the 4 before you, I've almost been in fistfights. And the people I was talking to would not have just walked away cleanly. This may be a longer, older email. It was the end of my junior year in college at Arizona State University. My roommate and I had secured jobs on the Kenai Peninsula, Alaska, through a good friend of ours who had fished commercial salmon the year before. Set netting in between the Cassiar and Kenai rivers. My roommate secured a job with Jeff Ransom, who owned the sites. He passed away the same winter in an avalanche while snow machining in December, I believe. Jeff's sites were on the mouth of the Kenai River. I did not secure a job until I arrived in Homer. I had a job fishing halibut for a 48-hour fish. I don't know the regulations now. The job is with Kevin Duffy, who was Jeff Ransom's brother-in-law. He referred me to Debbie Nakata, who owned SetNet sites just south of Jeff's on the Cassiar Riverside. I'm just giving you the background in case you wanted to verify. Deb still lives there and in Hawaii in the winter. We started our trek and arrived at the Canadian border in Vancouver, headed on through Whistler and the switchbacks up 97 North, that's my other old backyard, to Prince George and then 16 West, and proceeded to hit the 37 Cassiar Highway. On the map, it was a single red line, which means 2-lane paved road. Not. It was 800 miles of 2-lane dirt and gravel. So I headed north in my 2-wheel drive 1986 Toyota pickup truck with 200,000 miles on it already. We'd stopped at Iskut, BC, to get gas and some food. May 28, 1993. It was almost 9 p.m. 8:45 p.m., somewhere around there. Oh, sorry. Excuse me. May 28th, 1993. It was almost 9 p.m. or 8:45 p.m., somewhere around there. I know this because I'll never forget this day and what happened next. I go over it in my head daily. I'm almost 50 now, and I was 23 then, and I can remember the scent in the air, the scent of the forest, a scent that I did not experience in Arizona. It was the scent of pure, clean air, the forest and rain all combined. When we pulled out of the gas station, I looked at my truck's clock, and it said 8:59 p.m. The sun was on the horizon. No sunset yet. I drove for about 2 miles and then pulled over to the side of the road because I thought I'd left my wallet at the gas station. After getting out of my truck, I found it on the floor between my feet. I jumped back in the truck and put it in drive. I was creeping along at first because I was putting my wallet in my bag behind my seat. So I was halfway turned around. While moving forward, so I was only going about 10 miles per hour, and my roommate in the passenger seat had his head down, leaning forward, taking off his shoes. And as I turned and put both hands on the wheel, my focus was back straight ahead, and I started to accelerate to maybe 25 miles per hour when, about, I would say, 75 yards ahead from the tree line on my right, I saw what I thought was a grizzly bear at first glance, exiting the tree line and starting to cross the road. And I was about to say grizzly, because at first glance, in a split second, that's what my brain said. But in another split second, as I took my foot off the gas, I saw something larger than a grizzly take its first step, 2 steps across the road on 2 feet. I basically froze as my truck rolled forward, and the next thing I know, I slammed on the brakes, sliding a little in the gravel. And as my roommate, who hadn't looked up yet, hit the dash in the glove box with his chest and part of his face, I screamed, "Bigfoot!" and came to a halt. My roommate looked up and went silent. When I looked at him first, he was staring straight ahead with eyes more wide open than I'd ever seen before. I looked back ahead and watched the 3rd and 4th steps. It never turned and looked at us. And we were at this time 40 feet from it. The funny thing is, it didn't look at us at all. But the child it was carrying in its right opposite arm, which was high up on her chest, and its upper torso, was at her shoulder. And it was turned and looking right at us from behind her head. It was almost peering at us from behind the right side of her head. As its mom walked across the road, it never took its eyes off us the whole way across the road, which only lasted about 3 or 4 more steps. Her left arm looked very long as it dangled almost to her knees. She wasn't swinging her arm, probably because she was carrying her child. It immediately entered the opposite tree line, and as it did, I accelerated towards her and slammed on the brakes where she entered the tree line and jumped out of my truck. My roommate said, "Don't get out, what are you doing?" But in saying that, he had already opened his door and was on his way out as well. I ran from my truck to the tree line and just stood there with my ears facing the trees. I heard no sound. I stood there for 5 minutes in silence and never heard a sound. I slowly backed away from the tree line, looked up and recognized the tree she had entered under. I looked at the branch she went under, and there was no way it was less than 8 to 9 feet from the ground. We got back in the truck and started driving. After sitting in silence for maybe 2 to 3 minutes, my roommate says, "Did you see that?" I said, "Yes, I did. Did you see the child it was holding?" And my roommate said, "That was a baby. A human baby." And as I said that was not a human, he said, "No, I didn't mean it like that. I mean, it looked like a human." And I said, "Yes, it did. It looked like a person." And my roommate then yelled while looking right at me, "What the F?" When he said that, tears started coming from my eyes, and he said, "Why are you crying?" And I said, "I don't know." We drove in silence for the next hour until he said, "What are we going to tell everybody?" And I said, "I don't know. I'm going to tell everyone I saw a Bigfoot and a baby." "I don't know, maybe not, because no one will believe us, because people are idiots." And we talked about the features of the child's face and the size of its eyes and how it was looking at us, the hair color, the mother's height, the weight or possible weight and size of the mother, etc., and just kept driving. The whole summer in Alaska, that summer, every time I heard a noise in the trees, I would stop and just listen and eventually start shaking. It changed my life forever. And I went over what happened in my head practically every day for the last 25 years. But I'm okay with that because I've accepted it as a blessing and I embrace it. And you've made me now embrace it even more. So thank you for your channel. Any questions? Feel free to ask. That'd be a great story, story. That would be a great experience to hear firsthand, wouldn't it? So this, Anthony, you're going to get the look into note for Sarah, and you're going to get an email. I don't know when, but you're going to get one. Just saying. Just saying. Two stories. Okay, I'll make this quick as I can. I'll make this quick as I can. I have two stories to tell. First one happened about 3 years after getting out of the Navy, about 1973. And I was hunting in the Atchafalaya Basin, south central Louisiana. My father, myself, and my friend and hunting mentor, Frank. Frank was the best hunter and woodsman I've ever, even till today, known. He was part Native American and had a sixth sense about nature unlike anyone else I've known. We were hunting about 1.5 miles from any road. The basin was flooded and we were hunting in water from 6 inches to 4 feet deep. Frank killed a nice 4-point buck. My daddy and I went to meet him just about 300 yards away, and it was decided that Daddy would take the guns and go out in the woods to the truck and wait for Frank and me to float the buck out, which is easier than dragging or poling a deer out. But to do so, we'd have to travel through the woods on a different route than Daddy, and would take us a little longer. And as we were floating the deer out, I realized that something was paralleling us on the left of us about 30 yards away in the thick cypress trees. We were alone. Except for Daddy, who was by now at least 500 or 600 yards ahead of us. And we had a pole cut about 6 feet long with a rope tied in the middle, and each of us having the pole across our waist. We were walking side by side. I stopped when I heard the footsteps and looked behind us off to the left. I saw nothing. When I turned around, Frank was looking at me with an amused look, and I asked him, Do you hear that? And he smiled and said, yes. I started walking again. The walking off to the left started again, and I stopped again. But when I turned around, I caught a glimpse of black go behind a tree. The problem was the black was up in the tree, not at the water level, and I saw water rippling in the swamp, but the black movement was too high to be in the water, I thought. Frank told me, let's go. Frank told me, let's go. Don't worry with him. This confused me. Frank knew him? This time, instead of walking and facing the direction we were walking, I turned and walked looking back, at which time I saw a tall black figure passing between the trees. At this time, I started really putting an effort into pulling the buck out. Frank just chuckled and told me that I did not have to worry. Let's just get in the truck. The splashing sound of walking followed on the other side of us for another 15 to 20 minutes until we arrived at the truck. We loaded the deer, and I turned to tell my dad what had happened. Frank put his hand on my shoulder, looked me in the eyes, and just barely shook his head no. I did not speak of it that day or any day for years. Then, telling the story only once to some younger hunters who just laughed and gave me the "you're full of shit" look, I have not spoken of it again until this email. And you're right about one thing for sure. Once you have an experience such as this, the woods are never the same. Years later, maybe 20 or so, I had stayed on my deer stand until dark in the same general area, and that night I heard 3 distinctive loud knocks. I said to myself at that time, damn, I wish I had not heard that, but I had. I left carefully and alertly and went back to my little camp, about 2 miles away. I had a bourbon and said, this is for you, Frank, as it reminded me of Frank and our time together. But I was not as afraid as the first time, but very aware. No doubt. Excuse me. It changes a lot, obviously, in life, and a lot of you people know. All those of you here who know, you know it changes a lot when you get this reality slapped in your face. This next email is titled, Tell them to not just look around, but to also look up. Hi, Steve. I've sent you a couple of emails. This time I'm going to share something that happened to me. Your, quote, angry and a caution, end quote, video triggered this. I do not know what to make of it, but I think I likely nearly got disappeared. I don't recall what year it was. 80, 84 probably. It was either in late high school or early in college. It was mid to late summer, so I'd have been doing the same things either way. Back home helping with the family business. We were 14 miles from town where the road along the river turned away from the river and went through a pass to the next canyon. Final house on the road. Final house along the river with good access and with public power instead of generators only, surrounded by national forest land for miles. And as I would often do, I walked about a mile or a mile and a half across a big field rather than climbing over a little house to use the road, then walked down to our neighbor's place. An older couple on one side of the road, a widow on the other side, and a family just beyond. I'd go sit on the porch and listen to them tell stories of the old days, or we'd mess around in their postage-stamped garden, just being neighbors. I think they were the first people Dad told about my birth, so yeah, they kind of knew me by then. And on the way home, I left the road to cross the field, past the USFS trailhead, and stayed in the dirt 2-track crossing the field. The 2-track follows a fence line dividing the field into 2 sections. The sun was setting, with the shadow line about 100 yards on the other side of the fence from me. That's where thing that connects to your rant happened. I'm thinking about the next thing. I realized that I could hear birds 150 to 200 yards on either side of me, but none up close. And as I was pondering the oddness, I noticed off to my left, the west, where a finger of grass ran up a small ridgeline into the timber, there was a buck in velvet watching me. And all of a sudden, that buck broke into a dead run for the tree line. To this day, I do not know what it was, but that field grass was shoulder high because there was no cows on it that year, and something took off from near me after that buck. The deer was running mostly in a straight line, and this thing was always going straight at it, so not making a curved course, converging with the deer and moving much faster. Only, and this is where it is weird, there was nothing visible there. Instead, a roundish patch of grass was being flattened ahead of it and popping up behind it, as if there was a 30-foot diameter invisible beach ball rolling over the grass. And I shit you not, that was one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. Looking back, I think the buck saved my life. If it had not been there and not run away, drawing attention away from me, I'd have walked into an ambush of some unknown, apparently invisible thing. Some days, all you can say is, what the F? Tom. God, you got that right, Tom. What the F? I think it's being said daily from basically every functioning brain on the planet today. Really, right? That's pretty creepy. That'd be a really, really creepy thing to witness. Don't you think, you guys? Very creepy. I don't know what this is, but I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to eat some food and go into a coma. I'm so done. Excuse me. Got up 4 o'clock. 4 o'clock. Didn't sit down till about 3, I think, for the first time. Bigfoot 10 feet from me is the title of this email. Hi, I watch your program all the time, and I really like your program. I want to tell you what happened to me in regards to Bigfoot back somewhere, and I think it was 2012, something like that, around November. I was helping a friend of mine put up a fence for a horse I gave her. We were putting posts in, and we kept hearing down the steep ravine some stomping around, branches breaking, some stomping around. Okay, there's some punctuations missing, you guys, all right? Some stomping around, branches breaking, and her kids would say, hey, looks like there's something black down there. And I would say probably deer or squirrels, something, like that. We got all the fence done, and we started to put the gate up before we could lead her horse out into this little stall we had. And we decided to go to town, and her twin boys were about 12 years old, and so when we come back, we're pulling down the driveway, and she's got woods all around, a big deep ravine down behind the fenced area. I start to get out of my vehicle and seen the boys are standing on the porch, and all of a sudden, we hear this big, deep screaming sound like it was kind of high up in the air. And I looked at her, she looked at me, and I said, man, I'm going to run down there and scare these cats out of the tree. Sounds like they're killing each other, or gonna kill each other. And so I took off running, and thank the Lord there was a fence, and it stopped me in my tracks, because right on the other side of the fence, I would have ran right into that Bigfoot. I stopped, and he was still in a scream, and he had his back towards me, and his head was up in the air screaming, and I was hanging onto that fence in shock, just looking right at him. He was reddish brown, kinky curly hair. That's how close I was to it. It was massively built, and his arms were long, and when he came out of that scream, he didn't know I was there. He came out of that scream, and the twin boys was running down behind me, and I think he heard them running, and I'm still standing there in shock. And he heard them. He pushed the big trees apart with his arms to get away from us, and he took like maybe 4 huge, massive steps and jumped down the ravine, and the boys were saying, let's go after him, let's go after him. I looked at them in shock and I said, "Not me." "You can." And that's the first time I've seen one. I have pictures of a baby one in a tree, and I've seen several different colored ones and heard them talking. And they talk a different language. And one told me that they are tribes, and one was in a tribe called the Sachagua? Can't read it. Why can't I read that? Sachagua tribe. Sachawawa tribe? I don't know what the word is. S-A-C-H-A or G-U. Oh, man. Tribe. If you want to hear a few more, contact me. Or call me back and you can have a good one. All right. So, this is going to get a look into. If you want to get contacted, you're going to look into. Done. And you're going to be getting an email. We're going to talk to you about this. I want to hear all you got and share it with the people if you would. Now, what am I doing now? I gotta go, you guys. I tried to do the best I could. I'm not organized, obviously. But it's chaotic time of year. Is what it is. Everybody should be used to this shit by now, this time of year from me, right? But tomorrow, I think I'm home later tomorrow. And who knows? We'll see what's up. But I might be able to hit the man cave and get everybody up to date and get some new voices heard. And I think Sarah's going to line up some people to have a conversation with me on the channel so you guys can listen in. All right? So there. Share my story at howtohunt.com. Get that truth rolling, you guys, and I'll talk to you later. Everyone, I hope is safe and well and happy. I'll be back shortly.